So the coronavirus or COVID-19 is a reality for all of us. It's affecting all of our lives, and a big way that is happening is with our food. Maybe you're someone who isn't used to cooking a lot and now you're having to prepare most of your meals, if not all of them, at home. Maybe you enjoy cooking but you usually do it with a recipe and now you're not really sure how to pull meals together with just the things that you have available. Or maybe you're just feeling extra stressed right now and so that's making meals harder, or maybe you're just kind of running out of ideas. Whatever the case is, I wanted to give you some ideas and some tips for cooking and planning your meals to try to take off some of that stress and hopefully make things a little bit easier for you. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, before we get into everything, if you do happen to be new here, my name is Sarah and I am a registered dietitian, and this whole channel is about food and nutrition stuff. So if you're into that sort of thing, then you can subscribe and stay plugged in with what we're doing here. But also, if you're a regular, you will notice I'm not in my normal spot. I haven't done a sit-down video in a little while now, and we have actually moved. So if you didn't know that, that's a thing that happened. And so I'm just here in front of this green wall. It's just a random room in the new house, and we're just gonna work with it. So let's get into the actual tips. So the first thing you want to be thinking about are the main categories that make up a meal. If you are looking at your pantry and fridge and just kind of what you have in the house and having, all of these disparate options and you don't really know how to pull them together into something cohesive, it can all be really overwhelming and you don't even know where to start. So breaking it down into categories really, really helps. And the 4 categories you want to be thinking about are carbs, fat, protein, and fiber. Now, you can fill in these categories at any meal however you want, but having something in each category and kind of just checking those boxes is a really good way to do it. So just to give you a few examples, this is not going to be an exhaustive list, but carbs are going to be things like bread, rice, pasta, crackers, any sort of other grains you might have. If you have some corn around, that can also be a starch because that's a grain actually. Peas are another starch. Beans can provide some starch, some carbs. So those are some of the things that are going to fit into that carb category. Potatoes and sweet potatoes will fit there as well. Now, when we're thinking about fats, fat can come in a couple of ways. First off, sometimes it's just a part of the other things you're eating. So if you're sauteing something in oil, or if you have some butter in your mashed potatoes or something like that, the fats could just kind of be in the mix. But you also might have just fats on their own that you're adding in, something like guacamole or just diced avocado. Cheeses are going to be a source of fats. Also, things like nuts and seeds are going to have fat. If you have some sort of salad dressing made with oil, that's going to have some fat in it. All of those things are ways that fats could come in and be a part of your meal. Now, as far as protein, of course, that's going to come from meat and chicken and fish, the things that a lot of us think about, but also don't forget eggs are a source of protein. Plant-based proteins like tofu, edamame, beans have protein in them as well as your cheeses, nuts and seeds. There's a lot of different ways that you can fill in that protein part for your meal. And also a lot of those proteins have fat as a part of them too. So going back to the fat, if you think about your meats are going to have some fat in there, fatty fish. Canned meats are also going to be great here as far as non-perishable items that you have on hand that can fill in that protein category and may also have some fats coming with them as well. And then the 4th category, fiber, this is mostly going to be your fruits and vegetables. There can also be some fiber in whole grains, so that's another way you can have fiber in there. Beans have fiber, but I kind of think of this as being largely the fruit and veggie category. That's a great place to get your fiber, and that could be fresh things that you have on hand, but it could also be canned or frozen. Whatever you have works, but it's just thinking about those 4 categories: carbs, fat, protein, and fiber, and finding something that will fill in each of those blanks. Another way to approach your meal planning and figuring out what you're going to cook is to think of variations on things that you already know how to do. So if you already have a few things that you know how to cook, or favorite recipes or styles of meals that you usually make, think of that and just think of how you can tweak it with what you have available. So if you have a soup recipe that you normally make, but you don't quite have all of the vegetables you would normally use or all the right ingredients, think of how you can just do a variation on that soup with what you have around. I think this is another great way to kind of narrow in and not feel so overwhelmed by all the possibilities by thinking in a lane that you're already familiar with and just seeing how you can shift it a little bit based on what's available. That can make it a lot less overwhelming. Another thing that can help you focus in a little bit is to pick a flavor theme. So instead of, again, looking at whatever you have, think about what kind of flavors go together, or pick a type of cuisine. So maybe you want to go with Asian flavors for this meal, or Mexican flavors, or Mediterranean flavors. Whatever it is, just think of a theme that you can base that meal around as far as the flavor profile goes, because that's going to help you focus, again, just to kind of make it less overwhelming, but also it's going to help make sure that all the parts of your meal are a little bit more cohesive and go together. And this can feel like kind of an extra thing, like, why do I need to be thinking about this right now? But when we're in this situation, it's not just about nutrition, it's also about our mental well-being, right? And anything we can do to help things feel less stressful, or less like we just got to use whatever we have, I think that goes a long way and just can help with your mental state and feeling just as calm as you can. Because this time there's a lot of stress and anxiety. I know I definitely feel it, so I'm sure a lot of you are feeling it too. So picking that theme gives you just a focus in on what you're gonna cook, but it also makes your meal more enjoyable. It makes all the parts go together, and so it doesn't feel as much like a panic scramble to just cook whatever you have. And if you have some basic pantry ingredients, it's not anything extra to pull those flavors together. It's just taking that plain basic ingredient and then adding the right seasonings or whatever, or flavorings from what you have in your spice cabinet or your fridge to make it all feel like it was planned to be that way. Avoiding food waste is also going to be huge right now. Of course, it's something that's important all the time, but especially when we are having limited trips to the grocery store or may not be going grocery shopping at all, we want to make sure that none of our food is going to waste and we're using everything that we can. So just being aware of what you have on hand, what's most perishable, what needs to be used first versus what can stick around and last for a few more days or even weeks, depending on if what it is. But just having that awareness, and then also noticing things that maybe are about to go and thinking about, okay, how can we incorporate that into a future meal, or how can we save that for later? Because if you do have a way to preserve food, for most of us, that's going to be a freezer. If you have the freezer space to throw some things in there, definitely think about that. And what you can save and how you could use it in the future. That's really going to help you with avoiding that food waste. Also, make sure that you're using the resources that are available to you. Use YouTube videos, use Google, it's your friend. A lot of times, even just, on a regular day, much less when all this stuff is going on, people ask me like, how do you cook this thing? Or what kind of flavors go good with this? And a lot of times I might have an idea, but also I'm like, just look it up. I mean, that's what I do when I need recipes just any day of the week. So make sure that you're using those resources, because there's a wealth of information out there. And even if your internet isn't great right now, another thing that can be helpful is just looking at maybe magazines you have laying around or cookbooks, seeing what's there and making sure that you're using what's available to you, especially if you feel like you're running out of ideas. Now, you might not be able to make exactly what the recipe says because you might not have all the ingredients, but even if it kind of gives you an idea of something you can do and you can do a variation on that with what you have, it's just another way to help you kind of focus, and instead of having all the possibilities out there, finding something specific to be your guide. Some other resources that are great to have, one is dryum.org. That's a nonprofit that I work with, the Dr. Yum Project, and we have a free recipe website, but we also have a tool on there called Meal-o-Matic. Meal-o-Matic is one of my favorite things to tell people about just in general all the time, but especially now. What it is it's a tool that has 7 different meal frameworks. So like a stir fry or a curry or a soup or a pasta. There are these different frameworks. You click one and then you go through and pick the things that you have on hand, and then it generates a custom recipe for you. So it's super helpful all the time, but especially now when you're just trying to work with what you have around, it can help you create that recipe with what is available to you. Now, there are a couple things to know. The main one is that there are some staples that you're going to need for a given recipe. So for the stir fry maker, for example, for the stir fry sauce, you need soy sauce. You also need rice vinegar. If you have like white vinegar or something like that, that would work too. But you do need those things. For the curry maker, you need curry paste. You need some coconut milk. You need some fish sauce. Obviously, if you're going to do the pasta maker, you're going to have pasta. So there are some things like that that you're going to have around. So, but just looking at the makers, it's all listed out there when you go through and select your things, like what other things you may need. But it's a really, really great tool to help you create something that all goes together and tastes really good. And then the other thing to know is that it is free on the Dr. Yum website. It is mobile friendly. Anyone can use it. If you really do want to buy an app, there is an app in the Apple App Store. So if you have an iPhone and you're really like, no, I want a specific app for that, then you can buy it, but it is free for everyone and it works great on mobile. You know, I have an Android phone and I use it all the time and it's wonderful. And then another resource directly from me is going to be my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. On those platforms, I am sharing tips on recipes to make, the kind of stuff I'm eating, other things you can do. So while this video is a great jumping off point, if you want to stay connected with more tips as the days go on, then that is another resource, another place where you can get information. You also don't want to forget flavor with all of this. So it can be really easy to feel like, oh, I just got to eat something and it doesn't matter what it is. But taking that extra step to just think about flavor makes your meals so much more enjoyable, and it's going to do a lot to help with your emotional and mental well-being. So things like citrus, herbs and spices, garlic, ginger, different types of sauces that you might have in your fridge or in your pantry. Any of those things can go a long way to make a meal really, really, really delicious. So always thinking about the ways that you can add flavor to your meals, the way you can give them that little extra boost is going to go a long way. I also want to talk a little bit about food safety, because we never want to get sick from our food, but we especially don't want it happening now while we're trying to social distance. Also, while it would just be another stress on you with everything going on, and considering the issue of hospital capacities and everything they're doing to try to treat people who are getting sick. You know, we want to prevent any sort of foodborne illness for a lot of different reasons. So, you know, do basic general things like washing your hands, of course. We want to make sure we're washing our hands. We want to make sure that we're cooking foods thoroughly, cooking your meats to the proper temperature. If you have a meat thermometer, definitely use it and make use of it to make sure that your food is cooked well. Also, when things are cooked and you want to save them for leftovers, cool those things promptly. Do not leave stuff lying around. Pizza cannot sit out overnight. That is not a safe thing to do. Things need to get in the fridge and get cooled. And if you have things like big pots of soup, breaking those into smaller containers, putting them in an ice bath if you can, really trying to get those things cold. Because when you have a big giant container with hot food in it, it can take a long time before the center of that gets cool, like a really long time, much longer than you would want. So always making sure that you're cooling your food promptly and making sure that it gets cold. And when you're reheating, making sure that you're reheating things till they're hot, and not heating and cooling and heating and cooling and heating and cooling food over and over again. Once you heat it up, reheat it, you're not cooling it again. It's done. That's, you know, that's kind of the end of it. Because that window of about 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 Fahrenheit is called the danger zone, and that's where pathogens can grow, and that's what can make us sick from our food. So if you are, you know, cooking something and then you cool it, it's going through that danger zone, and then if you reheat it and you don't eat it and then you cool it again, it's going back through the danger zone, and then it's going to go through it again when you reheat it. We don't want all that going back and forth. So cool it. Once you heat it, eat it, or it's done. And so it's just about being aware when you're reheating things. Only heating up the portion that you want to eat now, and knowing that if you finish that and you're still hungry, you can heat up more later, but not heating up more than you need. I also want to address grocery shopping a little bit, because if you're social distancing, that might be kind of the one thing that you're doing. A lot of places, you know, everything else might be shut down, but they're still keeping the pharmacies and the grocery stores open so people can get food. Now, when it comes to grocery shopping, if you are going out to grocery shop, first off, we want to be strategic. We want to have a plan, because we want to be doing limited trips. We're not doing this going back and forth stuff. We want to make sure that we're going and getting what we need and then going back home. So plan everything out and be strategic. Also, Don't hoard stuff, okay? Get what you need. Don't feel bad for getting what you need or getting, don't underbuy, okay? We need to take care of ourselves, but also not getting more than you need or kind of, hoarding things. We don't want to be doing that, and having a plan helps with that. Because I know for me, when I've done my limited grocery shopping, even when you have a plan, once you see like someone else stocking up on stuff or maybe see a shelf that's empty, it's kind of like an animal response. You feel like, oh, I should get more stuff. And you actively have to work. I mean, I had to tell myself in the store, no, you don't need that. That's an emotional reaction. Resist it. Leave that thing there for the person who does need it. So just keeping that in mind and using the logical part of your brain to overcome some of those kind of like deep brain things that are happening when you're in the store can help you to just get the things that you need. When you are shopping, you of course want to consider things that are versatile and things that will last, either non-perishable foods, frozen foods, dried foods, canned foods, whatever it is. A mix of all of those I think is great, but just thinking about the things that are going to last if you can't make it to the store, and things that you can use in a lot of different ways. You want to think about meals, not just individual foods. So thinking ahead of, if I want to make this, what are the main components of that, is really helpful, so that when you get home, you don't have to worry about some of the things we were talking about earlier in the video. Everything, if it kind of goes together and has a plan, then that's going to make it easier for you when you're preparing your food. And thinking about those flavor boosters, the things you can add that are going to add that extra oomph to your meals and make them a lot more enjoyable. You also want to think about just what you enjoy eating. Again, enjoyment is important, and it's a big part of our everyday life, but especially now, having food that you enjoy can really go a long way in how you're feeling overall. And think about the things that maybe other people aren't buying. So, we hope that people aren't hoarding, and we do have a food supply that, can restock the shelves and everything. But with that said, you might go in the store and find that you can't get that thing that you want, or maybe there's something that's really popular that everyone is buying. If you can think about the things that maybe everyone isn't as comfortable cooking, or they don't like as much, so they're not buying, and you buy those things, then that can make it a little bit easier for you, especially if you plan for it that way. Because I know when I did go grocery shopping, a lot of the things I had planned weren't available, and then I kind of had to do last minute adjustments in the store, which is okay. This is my job, so I feel comfortable doing that. But even for me, as I think about future grocery trips that I might be taking, I'm going to be thinking about those things that people aren't buying as much. Because if you plan for the things that people aren't buying for yourself, then when you get to the store, you can just get them, and you don't have that extra layer of stress when you're shopping. And overall, just know, we're all working with what we have. I see, that some people might feel pressure, like they have to have these perfect meals or something like that. That is not the case. We're working with what we've got, and also there's no such thing as eating perfectly anytime, but especially not now. Getting food is what we need to do, and that's it. And I hope some of these tips can be helpful to you and help ease your stress, but please don't let it do the opposite and cause you extra stress about things like always fitting the perfect categories or whatever. That's not what this is about. We really want to create as much ease for ourselves as we can, and make our food as enjoyable as we can, so that is hopefully not a stressor, and that we can better cope with the situation or other things that might be going on that we need to deal with. Also, if you do have the ability, donating or helping with other efforts and organizations that are helping those who don't have food access is a really great thing you can do that can help other people, because there are a lot of people out there that don't have access to food or rely on different resources, and they're especially going to be having a hard time now because a lot of those resources aren't available depending on where they take place or what's happened with different regulations around safety, or them changing their operations or anything like that. There are going to be a lot of people that need those resources, and they may have some more difficulty getting access to them. So thinking about that is something we can all be doing as well. And let me know in the comments if you have any other ideas or tips or things that you've been doing that have been helpful. We're all in this together, and I think the more support and help we can provide each other, it makes a really big difference. And I'm thinking of all of you, and I hope that you're doing well. And yeah, that's it for this one. If you do happen to be new here, it's a whole new thing, but if you want to stick around, then we can hopefully all, work together to get through it. I have a couple videos over here, other things to watch. If you just need other things to do, you're looking for some distraction, then that's there for you too. I hope that you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.